everybody, and welcome to another Top 5 board gaming video. Today I'm going to talk about a very classic mechanic that we see in a lot of games, but in a lot of different contexts. I'm going to be talking about the ultimate in RNG, that is dice rolling. We're going to talk about dice rolling in the context, in this case, of a central mechanic. There are a lot of games that utilize dice in numerous different ways. You've got ones that are based off of how far you can move. There are games that use dice rolling to determine if you win or lose a combat. There's a lot of different ways that games utilize dice. Today, I'm going to focus on games that actually use dice as a very central portion, where it determines the number of actions that you get, how you're able to use those actions, what you're capable of doing, how far you can go, where you're at in turn order. I mean, just anything and everything about the game being determined by dice, but being up to you as the player to really figure out how it's going to fit in and how you're going to strategize with what it is that you've got. So we're moving here into what is either the best or the worst part of board gaming, just depending on how they roll, all about dice. So to start off, we'll just go straight into number 5. At number 5, I've got a game that's somewhat of a reboot of a previous game that was actually very, very long awaited. And I personally enjoyed it, but the reason that it's lower on this list is because I actually like the original game more. So let the hate commence. My number 5 is Roll for the Galaxy. That's right, the game that is based off of Race for the Galaxy, which again, I personally prefer more. I prefer Race for the Galaxy just a touch more. Roll for the Galaxy is actually very, very, very well done. I really, really enjoy it. It's a wonderful game. It's very well designed, and it's a game where if you have played Race for the Galaxy, then you can pick it up very, very quickly because the mechanics are all very, very similar to one another. The symbols are all identical. So, for example, you've got the exploration, settle, develop, etc., etc. All of those symbols are identical, so you can recognize them pretty much immediately. The only major difference is how the cards are distributed. And for me personally, again, I prefer the way that you have your cards, and based on those cards, you determine what you're going to do. You still have an RNG factor, random number generator, for lack of a better term, but with the cards, you really have, in my opinion, a little bit more control of how it's going to go down. Whereas with the dice one, with a Roll for the Galaxy, it can be a little bit more difficult to get what you want done, but a little bit of that is sort of mitigated because in order to perform a phase, you don't actually have to have that phase symbol on a die. You can activate it with anyone, which is very, very helpful, obviously. But again, the game itself, I do enjoy it. I like it. I just like it a little bit less than some of the other games on this list. And the only reason I like it less than other games on this list is because I prefer the source material. So what you're going to see a little bit later on is the exact opposite of that. But for now, Roll for the Galaxy is my number 5. At number 4, I've got a game that actually has the word dice in it in its title. It is Zombie Dice. Zombie Dice is a really, really fun, very, very quick game from Steve Jackson Games. It's a really interesting thing that's, again, press your luck. The idea is that you're rolling a whole bunch of dice, or rather you start off with several dice and then you can add more dice as you go on, and you roll them and roll them and roll them, and you go until you either say, stop, I'm finished, this is enough for me, and you get points based on the number of brains that you get, or you get blasted in the face with a shotgun. The very interesting thing about this game is there's actually 3 different levels of dice, and you're not necessarily certain which ones you're going to get. Where the green ones basically have more brains, and the red ones have a lot more shotgun blasts. And like I said, this is press your luck, so the idea is, you roll your first 3 dice, you see how you do, maybe it's not so great, so you just play it safe and cancel out, or maybe you go and you grab another die and you keep going and going and going. Like I said, very, very fun, very fast, obviously very easy to learn, and you can see extremely compact. It's just this nice little cylinder here, but obviously dice rolling, a very central mechanic to the game, but central to all of the games that I'll be talking about in this video is that it's about how you as a player use that luck. If you get bad luck, then it's up to you to decide whether or not you really want to try again, or if you want to just back down and not try anymore. But either way, Zombie Dice, a great little game, a ton of fun, and a surprising amount of replay value in a dice rolling game that's so simple. But regardless, my number 4. At number 3, I've got the other game on this list that I unfortunately do not own myself that is actually based off of a previous card game. This game is Bang the Dice game. For those of you who haven't played it before, Bang is really a team-based intrigue, back and forth type of crazy wackiness. If you've ever played Cash and Guns with the Yakuza expansion, very, very similar to that, except in the case of Bang, you don't actually know who's on your team. So I guess Ghost Stories might be a better analogy in this case. But the really nice thing is that Bang the card game is a lot of fun, but not only can it take a long time, but it can be a little bit convoluted, especially for new players. Bang the Dice game, very, very simple, very easy to play, somewhat similar in feel to Zombie Dice, where you've got the custom dice that have different symbols on them. Depending on what symbol you roll, you do whatever that symbol indicates. That's something that, again, we'll see a lot in these types of dice rolling games, because how else are you going to know what you do? But it's a lot of fun, and in the case of Bang the Dice game, it's a case where you took a game that you previously had and really genuinely made it a lot better by doing this dice mechanic instead. Because the card game, like I said, it could be a little bit, not necessarily faulty, but somewhat difficult, especially for new players, and just generally not nearly as fun and fast-paced as the dice game is. With the dice game, you're talking about just rolling dice really quickly, doing what they say, moving on, and going through. And with a game that has the name of Bang, you would expect that it would be moving fairly quickly. And the card game just sometimes doesn't necessarily do that, but the dice game, always, always, always. Great game, tons of fun. Bang the Dice game, my number 3. Number 2 was a bit of a toss-up between something very similar to what I had for Roll for the Galaxy and also Bang the Dice game, where there's 2 games that are virtually identical to one another, and I just had to pick one of them. And in this case, well, I would say that the king won out, but they both involve the king. In this case, New York won instead of Japan. The King of New York is my number 2 for this. And the reason that I went with King of New York over King of Tokyo is simply because I like the mechanics that King of New York added. Whereas with Roll for the Galaxy, it didn't necessarily add more mechanics compared to Race for the Galaxy. Really, the point of King of New York was to add more things for the players to do, more ways to spend your dice, more ways to use the cards, all of that kind of stuff. Just more locations to go to, more things to do at those locations. I mean, you can go on and on and on. Overall, it's a wonderful game, but it still has that very core essence of the press your luck mechanics that we all know and love from King of Tokyo. You roll the dice, you see how you did. Is it okay? No, not really. Reroll, reroll. And it's great. And I mean, obviously, a lot of the games that I've talked about here, or well, just a couple of the games really, are really about that press your luck idea. And you know, can you make it better? Can you make it better? And if you can, are you sure? Because there's always the chance that it's going to be worse, and then, you know, it just is. But again, just like anything and everything, I know I keep reiterating this over and over, but the fact is it's very true. The whole point of these games, the entire idea behind them, if you have dice rolling as a core mechanic related to how the players are capable of playing, what they're allowed to do, when they're allowed to do it, whatever it happens to be, you have to allow players to be able to strategize the ability to utilize those dice as they see fit. As opposed to something like, I mean, Monopoly immediately comes to hand, but one of my least favorite games of all time, Dexter, the board game, where you roll and you move that number of spaces. There's no question, there's no denying, there's no way to stop it. You just roll and you move, and that's it. And it's so frustrating because it takes all of the power out of the player's hands. But for King of New York, this puts the power in the player's hands even more so than King of Tokyo does. And that's part of why I like it so much. So King of New York is mine, number 2. At number 1, I've got the game that's not only my favorite game about dice rolling, but also one of my favorite games of all time because of, well, numerous different reasons that I'll talk about in just a second. The game is Kingsburg. Kingsburg is a wonderful example of how you can take something that is random inherently, like dice rolling, and turn it into something very positive for the players in terms of a strategy that they can use. One thing that I didn't want to mention too much was actually the expansion to Forge a Realm. I don't even have it with me, but I've got it on my shelf. To Forge a Realm is one of my favorite examples of how you can do an expansion very, very well. In part, it actually eliminates some of the RNG, which, you know, if you want to do, you can, but for me, that RNG, the one that it removes, which is with the soldiers that the king sends, is a very, very good thing to remove because that is way too arbitrary for me. More to the meat of the issue for this particular game, the idea is that you're rolling 3 dice, and based off the total number, that determines the player order. So the person with the highest number actually goes last. And then the idea is that the players take turns placing their dice. You can place 1, 2, or all 3 dice at a time, and you actually use the numbers to add up to influence specific people in the king's court. There are different ways to modify it. You've got things that give you +2. There's also a building that allows you to go up or down by 1. There's lots of different things that you can do with it, but it's a ton of fun. And again, like with every single game that I've talked about in this, the whole point is trying to mitigate, at least to an extent, the randomness that is created when you involve dice in any game. And Kingsburg does a wonderful job of doing that, but it's kind of weird because it's actually it's actually the only game on this particular list where that actually uses numerical dice. Everything else uses a die specific for their thing. Although, I mean, King of New York, yeah, you've got the 1, 2, 3 for victory points, but that doesn't count. But for Kingsburg, I just love the way that the randomness is somewhat mitigated, and not only that, but turned completely around into something that the players have to strategize for themselves. They have to figure out, how am I going to use these dice? These other people have this same dice. Are they going to get it before me? What if they get it? Then I have to come up with a plan B. All of that kind of stuff, while at the same time trying to figure out what is your overall long-term plan. What buildings do you want to build? How many soldiers do you think you're going to need? All of that kind of stuff. All very, very important questions that this game will help you answer based solely on your dice rolls, because in a very large way they dictate what you are able to do. But regardless, for all of those reasons, Kingsburg is my number 1 dice rolling based game. That's it for me, everybody. Thank you very much for watching my video on my top 5 dice-based board games. I hope that you enjoyed it, and as always, please feel free to put anything and everything in the comments below. Did you like my list? Did you not like my list? Do you agree, disagree, whatever it happens to be? Do you have a favorite game that I didn't talk about? Please let me know. I always love to hear the comments and suggestions from you guys, but thank you so very much for watching. Once again, I hope that you enjoyed it, and I will see you next time. Thank you very much again for watching my video of my top 5 favorite Dice-Centric games. As always, if you have your own personal favorites, if you totally agree or disagree with me, please put any and all things into the comments below. As usual, I've got several of my playlists linked up at the top of the page so you can check out some of my other videos, and if you want to see more of me in the future, click on the big giant subscribe button. In addition, you can follow me on Twitter at DannyCGamingSci so you can see when I upload new videos as well as when I start live streaming video games. With that, thank you very much again, and I'll see you next time.